Welcome everyone. I am Professor Adana, working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, MIT, Mysore. I am going to take you through the steps involved in the planning procedure. There are 7 steps involved in the planning procedure for any organization or service sector. So beginning with the first step, step number 1 is to establish verifiable objectives. Whatever are the objectives of the organization that the organization wants to achieve, all of these should be logically verifiable, and also they should be able to measure it quantitatively or qualitatively by customer satisfaction. So in the very first step, the only thing that has to be carried out is what kind of objectives that the organization wants to achieve, and they should be able to verify this with logic and proof from previous records. After the objectives of the organization have been set up, the next step is to establish what is called as planning premises. Planning premises simply means an assumption of the future. So what is happening is, whatever has happened in the past is taken into consideration, and based on this, future planning is carried out. For example, based on the way the market has behaved in the past couple of years about a certain product is taken into consideration, and the number of such products that have to be manufactured is considered before we carry out the planning procedure. This planning premises will be studied in detail in the next topic. After the planning premises, that is the assumption based on which the organization is going to carry out the planning, the next step will be to determine courses of action. Now, when I have studied the market, it could be the money market, it could be the product market, it could be any of the markets. After I have studied its behavior and its impact on the products in my organization, the next step will be to develop certain courses of action. That is, how the factory, how the organization, and how the service sector is going to perform. What are the steps that are going to be involved? Each person's responsibility in whatever the objectives that have to be met. All of this is determined when we move on to the step 3, which is determination of the courses of action that have to be made. These courses of action come up to us in the form of alternatives. That means I will have various alternatives of carrying out a particular procedure. I will have various alternatives of carrying out a particular action. This will be decided based on the number of courses of action that we have. Once these courses of action are in place and they are general, we move to the next step, which is evaluation of alternatives. Whatever alternatives we have put down in the previous step have to be evaluated for feasibility. Different types of factors are considered into feasibility. Here we look at environmental factors, we look at economic factors, we look at human behavior. Based on that, we evaluate which is the best course of action. After we evaluate the best course of action, we select it and carry out. After we have done this, the next thing that we need to take into consideration is, if one course of action fails, do we have a second backup plan? So the next step is to formulate derivatives. A derivative is what? It is a secondary option, or rather it is a second layer, second option of whatever we have in the first layer. So when I have an alternative that is set in step 4, I also have to have an alternative that is a derivative of it, which is a secondary option in step 5. These derivatives or secondary plans have to be ready and cannot be carried out after the planning procedure has already begun, or after the operation procedure has already begun. After formulating the derivatives, we need to secure that each and every employee in the organization is cooperating with the management and the people in the team to carry out whatever actions we have decided in the previous steps. So we need to secure cooperation of the employees. We need to ensure cooperation of managers at different levels at the step 6. Once this is done and all the operations are in progress, the next step will be to go on to controlling. So we do the controlling of the process by monitoring the way the plan is behaving. Once the plan has been executed, each and every process, right from the basic to the final, is monitored. Once this is monitored, we also have to control this process. Undesirable efforts are removed from the process, and finally we move on to getting the organizational goal. So these are the steps that are involved in planning. We will now understand what is the meaning of planning premises. A planning premise means an assumption that is made of the future market behavior based on which planning is carried out for today. So if I have to carry out planning for anything that has to happen in the next league, or rather in the next lot of my manufacturing or service provision, I have to make certain planning premises or certain assumptions. These assumptions are not guesses. These assumptions are purely based on logic and based on verifiable previous behaviors of the market. Now let us understand in detail what type of planning premises exist. The first type that we can see is tangible or intangible. The name itself suggests tangible means you can measure it quantitatively, whereas intangible means that you can measure it qualitatively. So the tangible kinds of measurement or premises that we can make are maybe the way the money market behaves, the way the product market behaves, the way the kind of economy that we have had in the past. These kind of things can be measured, and based on that we can take a call as to what kind of products have to be manufactured. And intangibly, human behavior, environmental conditions, these are conditions which cannot be measured with quantities. That is, you cannot give it a specific number. The next kind is the controllable and the uncontrollable premise. The controllable premise is a premise in which the organization by itself can control whatever behavior or whatever happens in the organization. For example, the kind of managerial skills that are involved, the kind of employees that are on roll, the kind of products that are being manufactured, the type of machines being employed, all of these are controllable in nature. For instance, if the demand increases, the company can control what to cut down and what to increase, and vice versa. So for an uncontrollable factor, we have again environmental challenges, we have economy of the country, we have availability of raw material. All of these things are uncontrollable. Based on this, again, an assumption has to be made. Internal or external premise. Internal premises are those which are within the organization. For example, we have manpower within the organization. This can be controlled by the organization. This is an assumption, or rather a prediction that is made based on the people within the organization. And external ones are those which are related to the outside world. That is, maybe the customer satisfaction, market. The market can be money market, product market. It can be anything. All of them are external to the organization, and hence these premises are not available within the organization. The last one is a constant or variable premise. These constant or variable premises are those that are, again, could be internal or external. Constant premises are those which remain unchanged throughout. I have a machine, a CNC machine. That CNC machine, as long as it is in working condition, will give me the amount of production that I require, whether I am running on a low demand or I am running on a high demand. And the variable ones are, for example, I have a worker who has a health issue. So his idle time will be more than maybe another time in the year when he is fit. So constant premises are those which remain unchanged no matter the external environment, and variable premises are those which vary from time to time. They are affected based on many factors. It could be within the organization or external to the organization. So these are the basis on which we make an assumption before we carry out the planning process. So I repeat the steps or rather the types of planning premises: tangible or intangible. These are measured quantitatively, these are measured qualitatively. Controllable and uncontrollable. Controllable are within the reach of the organization and can be controlled by the organization. Uncontrollable are ones that are external to the industry, cannot be controlled by the industry. Internal, these are again within the industry. External are the ones related to the industry but outside of the company. Constant are those which remain unchanged no matter the situation, and variable are those which are affected by situations and times. So these are the different types of planning premises. What are the different types of plans that we have? We have two major types of plans under which every other planning, or rather every other decision is carried out. The two types of plans, or rather plans, are divided into two types: standing plans and single use plans. These are the two major types of plans. Now what is a standing plan? A standing plan is a plan that is concrete in nature and does not change no matter what. It does not change from one project to another. It does not change from one employee to another. It does not change from it changes from one organization to another, but it does not change from whatever products the organization manufactures or whatever services the organization renders. So these kind of plans are there for majorly for the kind of products, the kind of projects that are taken up, and also for the employees who are within the organization. For example, the objectives. The objectives of the organization remain at a standstill no matter what. So the objective does not change when I am going to be manufacturing if I am going to manufacture a mobile phone, the objective is still the same. The objectives of my organization are still the same. Now we need to understand the difference between an objective and a purpose. Like an objective is something that is very specific in nature and a purpose is something that is generic. So here we have strategies also. What are the strategies that we are going to use in order to obtain the objectives of the organization? This remains the same no matter what. So again we have policies. Policies are made in the beginning of the organization for various reasons or for various aspects. Like we have policies that are set right for employee absenteeism. If an employee is not coming to work, there are certain policies which he has to follow. There is something called as a dress code policy. There is something called as a timeline policy. All of these policies are formulated irrespective of the project that is being carried out and irrespective of what product is being manufactured. The rules and regulations of the organization remain unchanged no matter what the service or the product being manufactured is. The procedures, that is, whatever is the procedures, it could be any kind of procedure, it could be a joining procedure, it could be an exit procedure, it could be any kind of procedures that need to be legally or rather followed within the organization according to their objectives. These are all standard in nature. And the methods in which whatever is being carried out in the organization, these are not methods that are related to the product. These are methods in actual execution of whatever be the work that is being done in the organization. These kind of plans are standard. They do not change unless you decide that there has to be a change, and they remain the same until that change takes place or they are completely abandoned. The next type of plan that we see is something called as a single-use plan. What is the single-use plan? A single-use plan, as the name itself suggests, will change from person to person, will change from project to project. So along with the standing plans of any organization, the organization will also have a single-use plan. A single-use plan deals with the programs that are involved in the organization. Now, if we are going to carry out a particular event, then for that event, there are going to be different kinds of people involved in that event. And in that event, there will be different types of operations that need to be executed. All of those things come under single-use plans, because once the event is completed, we usually trash those plans. We do not use it for any other operation or event. The schedules that are involved. Schedules that are involved in the event, again, they are program specific. Whatever is the operation taking place at that moment, the schedule is specific to that particular program. The projects that are involved, it could be a sub-project or a major project. Again, these projects, once they are completed, they are not carried out again. They are trashed. The plans related to this particular projects, again, are trashed after use. The budgets that are set right for specific events, these are also going to change. The main budget of the organization which comes into the objective and the single-use budgets are different from each other. The main budget will contain all the details related to these kind of sub-plans, whatever budgets are required for these kind of sub-plans. So we need to understand the difference between the two. Okay? So to summarize, if we go and look into this, we have two types of plans. One is a standing plan and a single-use plan. They are contradictory to each other. These plans remain standard unless they are changed or discarded completely. These plans, single-use plans, are one-time usage plans which are program specific, and after they are being used, they are usually discarded. Objectives, strategies, policies, rules, procedures and methods are standard to the organization no matter who the employee is. Even if the employee is a support department employee, an operations employee, or could be any employee from any kind of wing, these things remain standard for that employee. For example, a policy that is made for employee absenteeism. Here we have programs, schedules, projects, budgets. These are program specific. So here if I have to give you an example of a single use plan for an event, whatever is the budget that is set right. Okay. So these are the two types of plans that we have. We will go with what is the hierarchy of plans. While carrying out planning, there should be an order in which these plans are carried out. It is not a random procedure. It is not a haphazard manner. We know the steps that are involved in planning procedure. Also, now we need to understand what is the hierarchy, or rather what comes where. So if we start with the very first portion in the hierarchy of plans, the first is the mission and purpose of the organization. We first try and understand what is the objective that the organization wants to meet. Say for example, the organization is a healthcare organization or it is a hospital. So they decide what is their mission and purpose. In their mission and purpose, they might define something that is very, very simple or rather very specific in nature. Like example, it is an eye hospital. Their mission and purpose is to provide treatment for everyone with difficulties in their eyesight. Then they will decide their objectives. What is their objective? Their objectives are the strategies that they are going to use in order to carry out the mission and, or rather to achieve the mission and purpose of the organization. Now, when you are going to, when these objectives have to be carried out, there are going to be involved employees, there are going to be different people that are external to the agency and internal to the agency. How do we control the behavior of all of these people? How do we control the way the organization operates? This has to be controlled by setting right something in words which are the policies. The policies of the organization have to be crystal clear. These policies are related to various things. It could be the dress code, it could be employee conduct, it could be leave policy, it could be holiday policy, it could be every kind of everything that is in the organization comes under the heading of a policy. All these policies are put in place so as to successfully achieve the objectives, which are in turn set for achievement of the mission and purpose of the organization. After the policies are put in place, in order to execute these policies successfully, we need to have procedures and rules. Procedures and rules are different from policies. Policies are there to guide people on how things have to be carried out. A procedure is a step-by-step analysis, or rather a step-by-step description of every employee's role and duty in the organization, bound by certain rules. Again, these rules are governed by the policies that have been set by the organization. Policies are in turn governed by the objectives that the organization wants to meet. These are based on the mission and statement purposes of the organization. Further, we move to the programs and projects of the organization. What is a program? A program is a culmination of small projects. When I have small projects, I will have put them all together and get a program. So if I have to take an example, if you take a college fest, small events that take place in the college fest are taken to be projects, and all of them put together give me one full program. In the example that I have considered, I am going to consider mini projects like health camps or maybe some free eye checkups that are taking place. All of them put together will give me a program. Maybe some campaigns which we have conducted, they give me a program. These programs and projects are going to be governed by the procedures and rules which we have set in place already, which are governed by the policies which were created in order to fulfill the objectives of the mission and purpose of the organization. Finally, we have budgets. What are budgets? Budgets are written applications or written monetary agendas of the organization. How much money do we want to invest in a particular project? How much money do we have? What is the kind of income that we are getting, based on which we decide how much money we are going to spend for a particular turnover year. This is the hierarchy of plans, wherein we begin with the mission and statement purpose of the organization, move on to the objectives that are going to be used to verify this mission and objectives, mission and purpose, the policies that are set in place, procedures and rules that are governing the organization, programs and projects that are there around, and budgets that are going to work for the organization in present and in the future. We will now go through what are objectives. An objective is a goal or an aim that an organization has in order to achieve its mission or purpose. Now here, we need to understand that objectives are different from purposes. A purpose is a generic term that is universal to every organization in its line. For example, if I talk about or take the example of a hospital has the purpose of just delivering healthcare. A school has a purpose of delivering educational qualifications to students, or rather just imparting education. Whereas the objective of a hospital could be the type of service that it is rendering. Say, for example, if it is an eye hospital or if it is a cardiology specialized hospital, then that is the objective of the hospital. And a school, when we go for the type of syllabus, say CBSE, or if it is a high school or if it is a primary school, there we are making sure that the objective is very specific. So we need to understand that objectives are different from purposes. Now objectives have different characteristics. Understanding the different characteristics of objectives, the first is they are multiple in nature. They can be market specific objectives, they can be product specific objectives, they can be dealing with anything, they can be objectives related to public responsibility, they can be any kind of objectives that we are referring to. There are multiple types of objectives. The second important point is objectives have a hierarchy and a priority. You cannot just have an objective that is haphazard in nature. The first part of the hierarchy of objectives begin at the overall objectives of the organization. What is the overall objective of the organization? It is to impart education to students who come in there. Then we go on to divisional objectives. So what is this kind of education that we are going to impart to the students who come into the college? We have technical education, we have non-technical education, we have pure science, we have different kinds of divisions which we will be dealing with. Then once this is defined, the next objective will be departmental objectives. Departmental objectives deal with specific disciplines that are taught or imparted to the students. Like for example, civil, mechanical, electronics, computer science, electrical. These are departmental objectives. Whereas divisional objectives are whether the student is going to study BE or MBA or BSc or BA, and overall objective is the entire institution which is imparting technical and non-technical education. Beyond the departmental objective, we have individual objectives wherein you have professors who are specialized in various disciplines according to the conditions of the particular branch, and they will be imparting the departmental objectives to the students. The next one is, if you observe, objectives begin from the overall objectives and end at the individual. Again, they start at the individual and go back to the overall objective. That means to say that at the end of the student's life, the student has been imparted with the overall objective of the college, which is to impart education to the student. Objectives form a network between different departments, network and coordination between various people within the organization, all come because everyone has a common objective or everyone is working towards a common goal. Objectives may be long range or short range. Short range objectives will will differ from one department to another, one event to another, whereas long range objectives are more like statutory plans that are made by the organization. Finally, objectives may be tangible or intangible. There can be objectives which can be quantitatively measured, they are tangible in nature, and objectives which cannot be tangibly measured or they are intangible in nature. For example, the quality of students that come into the organization or leave the organization or the educational institution, the quality of the students, it is intangible, we cannot measure it with numbers. But the number of students that exit after a particular period of time, that can be measured with numbers. So these are the various characteristics of objectives. Next is decision-making process. What is a decision? A decision is a choice between two or more alternatives. It is very important to note that for a decision to be made, there should be more than one option available to us. So what is a manager doing when he is choosing between alternatives? He is going to make a logical, guided choice as to which is the most feasible option that he has among all the options that are present before him. A decision has certain characteristics. The main characteristics of a decision are that Decision making is a goal-oriented process. Whatever decision or choice that is made by the manager has to be towards the mission statement, has to be towards the goal of the organization. When we have a particular mission to accomplish or a particular goal to reach, we make a decision on the best possible way. We also understand that decision making involves alternatives. That means choices. There are various choices available, among which the person has to choose choose the best option. Decision making is an analytical and intellectual process. A person who has to make a decision should have knowledge about whatever alternatives are before him and should also be well versed with what are the tracks or should also be well versed with what are the ways in which he or she can attain the required goal. So this is an analytical process where careful analysis is to be done about every alternative that is being chosen, and it is an intellectual process, which means it has to be backed by logic. It is a continuous activity. It starts and ends never. It means to say that once you start an organization or anything, even your day-to-day activity, throughout the day you are making decisions among various alternatives that you have in front of you. So decision making is a continuous activity. It is all pervasive, means it is not specific to a department, it is not specific to a person, it is not specific to any kind of organization. Decision making is all pervasive, it is involved everywhere. You come across it in day-to-day life, you come across it at professional level, even at the personal level. Lastly, it is situational and dynamic. A decision taken depends on the situation in which the decision is being made, and it is dynamic in nature in the sense that it can change. You can change, another person in the same situation might make a different kind of decision. So a decision is always dynamic in nature. These are the characteristics of decision making process. The decision making process is as follows. Definition of objectives for a particular project has to be defined, and here all the controllable, uncontrollable factors, everything that will affect the project has to be taken into consideration. Further, here also we will try to see what are the different functions of each and every point in the organizational objective. Then we have to establish criteria within which we are going to carry out these objectives. What is the reason for us to carry out this objective, or what is the reason for us to establish or define that objective? Is the objective to get a greater profit, or is the objective to make bigger publicity? What is the objective? Based on that, we are going to establish a criteria. Next, we formulate different models depending on whatever criteria that we have. Either you make a mathematical model like a forecasting model, a verbal model using words, a physical model using prototypes, a CAD model using some computer graphic software to represent what you want to see at the end of the entire decision making process. Once these models are formulated, we generate different alternatives by varying parameters within the model in order to see whether these objectives that we have defined earlier will be satisfied. These alternatives that are generated will again be observed, evaluated to see which is the best possible alternative that we can choose. The best is selected and the decision is implemented. The decision is implemented in the outside world, or rather into the process, and the feedback is again sent to see if this matches the objectives of the organization. If there is any change, any of these parameters will be changed. If there is no change, we continue with the cyclic process of decision making. This completes the process of decision making.